Okay, we're continuing with quotes. We're going in alphabetical order. The next one is Kolk, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And this is a guy who wrote a lot about psychology, psychiatry of people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And he wrote a famous book called The Body Keeps Score. And he makes some good points, but I also think he's full of BS, and I'll explain to you why. And it's good for you to know this, because there's a lot of con artists in the psychology and psychiatry business. He exaggerates the persistent bad effects of negative experiences. So the body keeps score. What he's sort of saying is every time you have a major bad traumatic event, it like almost causes internal scarring in your body from the psychological traumatic stress of the whole event. He calls it amygdala hijacked. Your cerebral cortex brain shuts down and you get amygdala hijack taking over. And it's an oversimplification, sort of almost like to the point of pseudoscience. And the reason why I don't like this is it's a throwback to psychoanalysis. It's a throwback to this concept of the repressed memory. And when you push a patient to keep on obsessing about their past experience, they magnify the symptom more and it makes them worse, okay? And the repressed memory business was all about that thing like children went to a daycare center and then they asked them, do you remember being abused? And the psychologist would plant in the mind of these kids, were they abused by the daycare center? And the whole thing was BS. It was proven to be false by a lady named Elizabeth Loftus. And again, this is sort of like a Freudian thing. Freud would always be like trying to get people to remember something bad, you know, about their family, about their parents or something, and want them to obsess on it and dwell on it. And it would make them, what I'm trying to say is, if you always obsess about the past, it's harder to get over it. If you say to yourself, well, I had a bad experience, I was treated unfairly, I was unlucky, whatever, now I must focus on the future, you're going to be better off. And so what I'm trying to say is, there's a lot of people who love this drama, but it doesn't help the patients, okay? Psychoanalysis of Freud's totally bogus. This repressed memory stuff is totally bogus. And all of that stuff just leads to the patients getting sicker. Like I said, there were some other psychiatrists who said psychoanalysis is a disease it pretends to cure. Okay, so here's some of his quotes. In order for a patient to recover, the most important thing is good social support. But, you know, it's true that good social support helps. The parent-child connection is the most powerful mental health intervention that's known. Yeah, having a good supportive mother and father is very helpful. Being able to perceive visceral sensations is the very essence of emotional awareness. Well, that's true too. You get a gut feeling if something's bothering you, and if you pay attention to it, you'll recognize the problem sooner rather than later. For adults and children alike, being in control of ourselves requires becoming familiar with our inner world and accurately identifying what scares, upsets, or delights us. Yeah, if you know something always bothers you, then you want to avoid it. It's like you can't change other people. If you find that other person's always rubbing you the wrong way, then you want to avoid that person. Being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental and meaningful and satisfying to our lives. Okay. Being truly heard and seen by the people around us, feeling that we are held in someone else's mind and heart. For our physiology to calm down, heal, and grow, we need a visceral feeling of safety. Okay, a good example of that is that lady who made that video about my stroke of insight and the idea that when she had a stroke, she wanted to recover. She went and lived with her mother. And her mother, you know, gave her a supportive, secure environment. So that's like, I think it was Liz Bolt Taylor or something. She had that TED Talk, My Stroke of Insight. Okay, the next one is Alfie Kohn. Alfie Kohn was born in 1957. He's a pretty famous educator. He's written a bunch of books about educating children, and they're good. I read tons of stuff in education. I found him one of the better authors. Books, and these are just multiple of his books: Unconditional Parenting, Homework Myth, What to Look For in a Classroom, Schooling Beyond Measure, What Does It Mean to Be Well Educated? Okay, so let's go through some of his suggestions here. Okay, he says, the problem with the way it is taught in the public schools, learning is decontextualized. Information is broken down into tiny pieces that bear no relation to the whole. We give students brick after brick of information until they graduate, at which point we assume they have a house. But they don't. What they have is a pile of bricks, and it doesn't last long. And that's true. The way public schools teach is it's a disgrace. All this disconnected information that's just in short-term memory for a test, and it's all forgotten. That's why people have like this big blank space, black hole. They can't remember anything from grade school and high school except how to type, how to drive, and maybe a teacher or two they liked. So it's designed to waste your time, turn you into a minimum wage employee. Okay, Alfie Kohn. We learn most readily, most naturally, most effectively when we start with the bigger picture. Yeah, that helps. The best way to help a child to succeed is to help them to fall in love with what they are doing, to increase interest in the task itself, to encourage. Yeah, if you tell the child this is worth knowing because it's going to help you in all these other ways, then the child's more motivated to pay attention. And you give them the big picture about what it's all about. Like you tell a kid, look, school is a memorization context. Therefore, you should learn memorization techniques. If you're good at memorization techniques, that will help you in school and to learn anything else you want to learn. Okay, Alfie Kohn. Unconditional love is what our children need to thrive. Yeah, good luck getting that for a public school system. They're going to castrate you, encourage you to snitch on your parents with the psychologist, label you as attention deficit, drug you with amphetamines, try to get you to say you're confused about your gender and castrate you. Okay, Alfie Kohn. If children feel safe, they feel safe to take risks and they're more likely to learn. Educational success should be measured by how strong your desire is to keep learning. Right. It's more important to show a child the enjoyment in learning so they read on their own than it is to have them read at such and such an age. Okay, Alfie Kohn. It is easier to score a student writer's proficiency with a sentence structure than their proficiency at evoking excitement in the reader. Right. Schools teach writing from like, stunk and bite me, which is just like animal training, trying to use proper grammar, but that's not what writing's about. Writing's about like telling a story to make your friends laugh. That's good writing. It can evoke a response in your friends. Okay, when kids fail, they tend to construct an image of themselves as incompetent, even helpless, which leads to more failure. Yeah, so they need encouragement. They need small stepping stones that they can handle rather than being overwhelmed. And the whole school grading system of competition, and you're not smart unless you learn your multiplication tables by this test day. They take the fun out of learning, whereas real learning is something you care about. It's interesting to learn. It's pleasant. Like think about talking to your parents. It's fun to learn when you talk to your parents. Okay, homework is the equivalent of giving kids a second shift when they get home. Homework may be the greatest extinguisher of curiosity. I would argue that 6 hours a day of academics per day is enough. What right does a school have to abrogate what families do during their family time? Yeah, it's a good point. One of the big purposes of public schools is take the kid away from their parents, to turn them into atheists, turn them against their parents' religion, turn them against their parents' values. Intrinsic motivation is a uniquely powerful predictor of achievement. Yeah, usually when somebody's going to become a good student, they really want to. And that's a lot of times why if a family values education, the child's more likely to value it. We are being sold a bill of goods when it comes to talking about tougher standards for our schools. The standards movement is always pushing teachers and students to focus on memorizing information, to regurgitate for high test scores. The shift is away from teaching students to be thinkers who can make sense of what they're learning. Yeah, standardized tests are largely BS. On the one hand, if you go to a small school, I actually like the standardized test as a way to compete with people from big, famous schools to prove I could compete with them, let's say at the college level, or at the med school level. I went to some state med school. Well, if I'm competing, I went to Harvard for my fellowship. But you can then compete with somebody from any place by looking at your test scores. But at the grade school level, it's mostly just makes people miserable. Okay? Grades tend to diminish students' interest in whatever they're learning. A graded orientation and a learning orientation are almost inversely related. It's like your coach. If you have a good coach, you like your coach. The goal is to win. Your coach doesn't grade you. In a sense, you're graded by your competition, what you do in the real world. Okay, whoever said there's no such thing as a stupid question never looked carefully at a standardized test. Alfie Kohn. Okay. Oh, here's a good one by a lady named Deborah Meyer. She says, no student should be expected to meet a standard that the educated adults can't meet. And I think that's a great quote. Why is a kid learning algebra when, educated adults don't know algebra, trigonometry, calculus, okay? Grades, rewards, punishments, and tests have little lasting effect on learning. I actually think that's true too. You remember things that you wanted to learn from. Okay, now here's some of my quotes. Things that are useful for learning long term are, sometimes there is a component of talent. motivation to do well. You care about it. You're interested in the activity. You start when you're young. You get a good coach. You have competition to make you energized to learn the material. You like doing it. You can learn from a variety of sources. You can go to the library on your own. Sometimes it's a question of having the time and money available to do it and making the deliberate practice. Okay. Here's Alfie Kohn now. He says, Alfie Kohn. He says, we would do well to adopt Deborah Meyer's mandate. No student should be expected to meet an academic requirement that a cross-section of successful adults in the community cannot. Yeah, he's absolutely right. The reason why they teach kids math in grade school and high school is mostly to distract them. You need a certain amount of math, about what you gain up to 7th grade or something, or maybe even 6th grade. I'm a triple-boarded Harvard-trained doctor in high-tech fields. I don't use any math I didn't know by about 3rd or 4th grade. The rest of it was all kind of a waste of time. Let's see here. He says, all persons give to pious rhetoric about the need to raise standards and produce world-class academic performance for the 21st century not only should be required to take these exams themselves, but should agree to have their scores published in the newspaper. Okay? And then Alfie Kohn, my nominee for the most chillingly Orwellian word now in widespread use is alignment, as in how can we make teachers align their teaching to the standards? A remarkable number of people, including some critics of high-stakes testings, have casually accepted this sort of talk, despite the fact that it is an appeal to naked power. Alignment isn't about improvement, it's about conformity. Yeah, they're saying we need to force the teachers to teach for the standardized test, rather than talk about things that the kids are actually interested in that would actually be useful to them. Okay, here's some other quote just added on. Creativity is a numbers game. The best predictor of how many creative works we produce in our lifetime is the total number of works we produce. Okay, well that's a little bit of a distortion. Anyways, Alfie Kohn, I think he's right. He basically says, make learning more enjoyable for the kid and the kid will learn more. And I totally agree with that. A few brief quotes here now from Dean Koontz. He's a pretty famous writer. He was poor growing up, so he read a lot and he got good. And then here's the quotes from him. Great prose doesn't come from piling on adjectives. It comes from finding the perfect metaphor that does triple duty. It describes a scene, reinforces the mood, and reveals something about the character. I began writing stories just to please myself, and that's where you really begin to see the value of life in writing, of a life in writing. Yeah, it's pleasant, it's therapeutic. A plot needs action. A plot without action is like pasta without garlic. It's like Dolly Parton without cleavage. When I'm working on a novel, I work 70-hour weeks. If you write with passion in your own style, you will make a place for yourself in the writing world. I never discuss my novel while writing it for fear that doing so will diminish my desire to finish it. Yeah, you can get a sense of achievement by having talked about it with your friends, but that can lower your energy level. You need high energy level to write a big book, so you want to keep your energy high. You get a false sense of reward by talking about it before you've actually done it. Okay, then there was this one guy on the internet who I kind of liked. He's called the Cultural Tutor, and he said some clever things. He said, minimalism, I just somehow stuck it over here because it reminded me of writing, and it reminded me of Western civilization and Christian culture. Dean Koontz is kind of a Christian writer. So the Cultural Tutor says, minimalism is the prose of the modern age, and when it's done by the average person, it's boring. The average person can't write minimalism prose as well as Hemingway. It's boring in writing, it's boring in architecture, it's boring in churches. Maximalism is too much. It's verbose, it's flowery prose, it's purple prose, it's Victorian age prose, it's a caricature with some similarity to Faulkner. Okay, that's it for today. Hope you found that helpful.